Hey everybody, how you doing today? I am here today with Barry Weisleder, who is the Federal Secretary of Socialist Action. He is the co-chair of the NDP caucus, Socialist Caucus. He's a longtime union organizer, and as he says, troublemaker. Thanks for coming on the show today, Barry.
You're very welcome.
Fantastic. So let's get this started out. Really simple, basic stuff for the viewers. What is Socialist Action?
Socialist Action is a revolutionary socialist workers' party which strives to assemble the best fighters for the working class to transform Canadian society and to eradicate capitalism on a global basis. So we're in solidarity with like-minded people around the world, and we work in various social movements with a focus on the working class movement, the workers' movement in this country.
And why would you say that socialist action is an important movement?
Well, we are striving for socialist transformation of society, and I think we do that more consistently and by employing the United Front approach, that is to work with allies across the workers' movement in a way that no other organization is doing. I mean, in terms of the temporal situation, we're living through a particularly acute crisis in late capitalism. We're still in the throes of an economic depression. It was worsened but not caused by the pandemic. The pandemic itself has seen millions of people die and hundreds of millions affected around the world. And the rise of right-wing populism, authoritarianism in the state, and the threat of nuclear annihilation. I think this gives us sufficient reason to be active, and we don't think that these problems can be addressed, much less eliminated, without a conscious revolutionary working class leadership. So that's where we're in the business of trying to organize that.
And so let's say a person is saying, well, okay, well, why don't I just go and organize with the Greens or the NDP? Why should I be organizing with Socialist Action instead of directly with a political party?
Well, the Green Party is pro-capitalist. In fact, its current leader is anti-choice and pro-Zionist. But putting that aside, it's not a working class party, and my analysis leads me to believe that class is decisive to affect a fundamental change. You need to recognize why things are the way they are, and that's basically because of the ownership of the economy by less than 1% of the population. That this system is inherently wasteful and belligerent and in nature. And that the Green Party is not going to overcome, nor will any of the other capitalist parties, the Conservatives, the Liberals, the Parti Québécois, Saskatchewan Party, the United Conservative Party of Alberta. All of these organizations are wedded to a great extent to capital, and they act in the interests of capital, more or less consistently. The NDP is a horse of a different color. It's the product of a fusion that occurred in the late 50s, early 1960s between the Canadian Labour Congress and the old Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. The NDP is not, never has been, nor will it be a socialist party, but it is based on the defensive organizations of the working class, the labor movement in this country, at least in English Canada, it's fair to say. And such a party is one that brings together millions of working people in votes and in hundreds of thousands in members who recognize the need for a party that's independent of Bay Street, that's independent of the capitalist class and the establishment political parties. So there's a contradiction between the reformist pro-capitalist outlook and strategy of the NDP leadership on the one hand, and the economic interests of the vast majority of those who vote for or join this party. We appeal to working people in the NDP and in the unions to fight for a workers' agenda. That is to put the working class, which is the immense majority of humanity, first, ahead of the interests of capital, private profit, and the environment destroying drives that wed us to a carbon intensive energy system in the interests of private profit. So the NDP is important, but the NDP will not transform capitalism. It's led by a careerist, parliamentary cretin leadership, which is not willing to even countenance um, the establishment of a democratically controlled planned economy in harmony with nature. So we need a revolutionary party, but revolutionary parties don't just spring from the head of Zeus. They're formed, by working people who contend with the issues that confront them, where they live, where they work, in their daily lives. And many of them, as a first step away from the parties of Bay Street, will join the NDP. We want to dialogue with people there and in the mass labor movement, and convince them of the need and the efficacy of a revolutionary solution to the crises of late capitalism. That entails conscious leadership, one that's not going to compromise the interests of the working class for, petty parliamentary reform or personal career. That's what we're about. We're about driving home the message that capitalism's day has come and gone, and that humanity and civilization and nature are threatened by its continued existence. And we stress the need for a new leadership that will fight to change everything. We fight for reforms. I want to, make that point very, very clear. We fight for concrete reforms to raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour, which is our watchword now. Which we won that policy at the most recent NDP federal convention, which was an important gain.
And this is tying into, I think, my next question, Barry, and I feel like you're going in that direction anyway, so why don't I just ask it? What is it that's, what are some concrete things that you would say Socialist Action, what actions has Socialist Action been embarking on?
Well, we've been around for decades, since the early 1990s, and actually our political roots go right back to the early communist movement 100 years ago in Canada in 1921 in the wake of the Russian Revolution. But what Socialist Action has done would entail making a very long list. And I'm proud to say that we've accomplished quite a lot for a small organization, although one that's growing rapidly as we speak. We have led the fight against imperialist war. We won many labor unions and the NDP to the removal of Canadian troops from Afghanistan. That's just one of the wars of the 20th century, pretty sordid affairs, which has resulted in a worse situation than the one that sparked the intervention by the Western powers. So that was an important achievement. We've been in the forefront of marking International Workers' Day, fighting for women's reproductive rights, choice on abortion, and defending that right, which is under attack intermittently by the right wing. We opposed the pipelines, and we continue to oppose any investment in, the high carbon-intensive energy system. We stand up for the right of nations to self-determination, and that includes Quebec, the Acadian people in Eastern Canada, as well as the Indigenous people across the Canadian state, across Turtle Island, for that matter, North America. We are in solidarity with our sister organization in the United States, which goes by the same name, Socialist Action. We have been very active lately, can I tell you, in the movement of solidarity with the Palestinian people. We opposed the creation of the apartheid state when Stalin and the Soviet Union voted at the UN General Assembly to enact a partition that led to the Nakba, in which 750,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes and their homeland 73 years ago. And lately, I think everyone will know that there has been a vicious attack by so-called Israeli Defense Forces on the people of Gaza. Over 200 killed, half of them women and children. This arose not from Palestinians setting off small bottle rockets and firecrackers against the Israeli arsenal, but because of the ongoing attempt to evict Palestinians from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and by the denial of basic civil liberties and human rights and equality to Palestinians within the occupied territories, within Israel proper, that is the inside the Green Line, the original boundaries of the Zionist state. So we're very proud of our record in opposition to settler colonialism, whether that's in Turtle Island or in the Middle East or anywhere else for that matter. That's why an organization like Socialist Action is necessary, because we don't just work episodically. We work continuously. We have a body of political principles, program, and a strategy which says that as long as any nation is oppressed, no nation can be free. So we abide by that. It informs our political practice. And we have a Democratic Centralist Party, which is the backbone of many important movements to bring about fundamental change in society.
And so on that vein, then, Barry, so what does success look like for the Socialist Action Party? Or for Socialist Action?
Success is having a material impact on the world and to change things that are so terribly wrong about the way society operates now. The false priorities. Putting profits before people means that there's a housing shortage. It means that there's lack of access to higher education in Canada. It means a grave injustice to the Indigenous people. There are many communities where there is still no clean drinking water available. Despite promises by many governments at the federal level to deal with this problem, very little progress is made. I'm wearing orange today, and why? You ask. I'll tell you anyway. It's because this is emblematic of the struggle of Indigenous people against the genocidal practices of the residential schools. The residential schools are as old as Canada. In fact, they existed until as recently as 20 years ago, and even today, child welfare services take away thousands of Indigenous kids from their parents, even more than they put in the residential schools of yesteryear. This is an ongoing problem. So we're marking not only the 215 graves of the children at that residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia, but the ongoing, there's so many more who are missing and just dumped into unmarked graves. Canadian Colonial Settler Society has to make amends, and before there can be reconciliation, there must be reparations. The giant Canadian resource corporations, oil, gas, mining, they should be expropriated and operated under workers' control if they're to be operating in the future. And from their fabulous $1 trillion resources must come the reparations to help Indigenous people live a good life, to climb out of poverty and want and lack of clean drinking water, adequate education and healthcare, and also to address the many other problems that we experience all across the country in terms of transportation and housing, and that's what we're committed to realize.
And it's been pointed out to me that the residential school system only ended in 1996,
Yeah.
And so that means that they were still functioning well through Trudeau Sr.'s career. And so it seems completely unlikely that his son would embark on an investigation to indict his own father. And so something like Socialist Action working through the NDP seems like that's the only way we would actually get any kind of investigation done on this issue.
To that, I would add, most of our work is outside the NDP. It's in the unions and it's in the streets with working people, fighting to rectify and eliminate injustices. So today is Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday. Regardless when people are watching this, doesn't matter. There's a rally downtown Toronto tomorrow to defund the police, and this speaks to police brutality and the murder of Black, Indigenous, and people of color across the country by the RCMP, by other municipal police services. The Canadian Armed Forces are rife with racism and sexism. Um, all of these issues motivate us to do what we do on an ongoing basis, and this is not going to happen, just by hoping and praying and wishing for the best. But it requires deliberate effort, and it requires ongoing political commitment and activism, and in that we specialize.
And along that vein, then, Barry, how do people get involved with your organization?
They can work closely with us and they can join us. Of course, we encourage people who agree with our principles, our program and strategy to join us. People who agree that in order to be effective, you need to have a disciplined party. We're democratic centralists. That means full democracy and debate and firm unity in action. We're going to have a convention on June the 12th, actually, not long from now. And that's where we will decide on our policies, our priorities, leadership, our budget. People can join us by writing to us and asking to join. One way is to approach us through the website, www.socialistaction.ca. You're going to put that on the screen? Maybe when this is edited. Socialistaction.ca. People are welcome to call anytime, speak to me or leave a message. 647-986-1917. Easy to remember. 1917 was the year of the Russian Revolution. 647-986-1917. You Canadian commies, you ought to know that. And people can write to us at our what is our Gmail address? It's socialistactioncanada@gmail.com. So there's a variety of ways. And what does joining entail? It entails paying dues once a month, attending at least one activity a month, and sharing in a great abundance of information, analysis, coming to conferences when you want, learning, sharing. We have a cross-country Zoom. You know this, John, because you've been part of it at least once or twice. Once a month, we have activists online from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland, Labrador, talking about the local work that they do and the demonstrations that we initiate, the movements in which we participate, our efforts to bring about change in the labor movement and the labor movement's political party, the NDP, despite all its shortcomings. But most of all, people can join simply by deciding that they wish to be active, whether it's on environmental, feminist, international solidarity, or labor political issues. Can I tell you what we're doing in the labor movement now?
Of course, absolutely.
The Canadian Labour Congress, which is the main union central in the country, represents over 3 million workers. It is hosting its cross-country convention in a couple of weeks. It'll be a virtual convention because of the pandemic. Over 3,000 delegates are expected to participate online. Socialist Action is one of the initiators of the Workers' Action Movement, and the Workers' Action Movement not unlike the Socialist Caucus and the NDP, strives to push the labor movement to the left, to make it more progressive, to put the movement back into the labor movement, to break the vicious cycle of passivity, concessions bargaining, two-tier wages and benefits that particularly alienate young workers and workers of color and women. We in the Workers' Action Movement are organizing, are leading a campaign called Labor Forward. Labor Forward says that we need to break with the class collaborationist policies of the Canadian labor movement, and to symbolize our commitment to fight for change from the bottom up, we are running for candidates for the top positions in the Canadian Labour Congress. We don't think change comes from the top down. We think it does emanate from the bottom up, but we want people in the labor movement to rally around a class struggle program that says no more concessions bargaining, defend the right to strike through mass action, even if it means defying labor legislation from the boss's governments that almost daily violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms when they say you can't go on strike. Yeah, I mean, the right to strike exists in this country when you don't use it. The moment you use it, if you're working at a large enterprise like the Montreal dockyards or the Postal Service, then that right is stripped away. So we say that the labor movement, should abide by the old slogan: an injury to one is an injury to all, and that means when someone is under attack, you are under attack, and it's our obligation collectively to rise to the defense of everyone who's under attack, because we know that our freedom is inseparable from the state of the rest of the movement. So in the Canadian Labour Congress, the Labour Forward is running 4 candidates for the top positions. Julius Arscott, who's a member of Socialist Action, running for president of the CLC. Jenny Esnard and Sandra Griffith Bonaparte running for executive vice president, and Harold Marcotte running for secretary treasurer. And again, we don't think the change is going to come from the top down, but by organizing a campaign on a principled basis, which says that union leaders shouldn't be paid more than the wages of the typical worker that they represent, that they should be resisting concessions bargaining, they should strive for greater democracy and accountability in the labor movement, they should be allied to all the movements for social justice, environmental, indigenous, women, and others, and standing up for international solidarity with those victimized by the imperialists, including our own imperialists here in Bay Street, in the country called Canada. That's what we're doing in the Canadian labor movement, because we think there will be no revolution until the working classes won to the proposition that a new system is necessary. And that requires leadership, constant campaigning, and Labor Forward in the CLC is going to grow. It's going to grow the Workers' Action Movement as we come out of the convention in a couple short weeks from now. Just as we have been building a larger and larger movement for socialist policy in the NDP through the Socialist Caucus, there are other groups that are active in those arenas and others, and we want to work with them. We don't think we have all the answers. We don't have solutions to every single problem. We don't have a blueprint for the new society. But we have a set of principles that we've derived from the great teachers of socialism over the past century and a half, and we're applying those lessons and trying to build the party that will advance all social struggles. And we think that the left, the components of the left, should work together. And by working together, we can discover our strengths and weaknesses and build a stronger, united revolutionary party that will win the decisive battles that lie ahead.
And so, as we close out the interview here, Barry, is there anything that you'd like to add to the discussion you feel like you haven't touched on?
The idea of the workers' government. How are we going to make a revolution? It's just not, an uprising and suddenly, society is transformed. We believe that there will be a number of phases involved in the struggle to transform capitalism into a bottom-up democratic socialism. The fight for a workers' government is a very important feature of the struggle to transform society. We don't think it will be primarily parliamentary in character, although the revolutionary socialists will have members of parliament, but we need to build structures outside of parliament and outside of the state in which working people represent themselves, much like the idea of workers' councils, which were pivotal in the Russian Revolution and in other revolutions that occurred in the 20th century. That's our vision, that we're going to fight for political change, the establishment of a government that is committed to the interests of the working class, not subordinate to capital, not in alliance with big business. And the striving for a workers' government is one way to express the idea that the majority who are excluded from power should take power into their own hands, institute a government that represents us, the vast majority. And if capital stands in the way, we'll have to push them aside and establish a new state, a worker state, led by a workers' government that is unmistakably and uncompromisingly in the interest of the vast majority. Therein lies the hope of humanity and the natural environment. There isn't a lot of time to do this, but we are doing what we can as best we can, and we can accomplish so much more if you join us.
Well, and with that, Barry, thank you so much for coming and being interviewed. I'll put this up straight away. Thanks so much, Barry. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.